Have you ever wondered how a single outcast, hidden in the reeds of the Nile, could grow to stand face to face with kings and change the course of history? Picture a shattered nation crying for rescue while a fugitive with a stutter confronts a pharaoh with nothing but a staff and an impossible faith. The story of Moses isn't just ancient legend, it's the ultimate paradox. A reluctant hero chosen to deliver millions, a murderer transformed into the friend of God, a flawed human whose footsteps echo between fire and cloud. If you dare to look beneath the miracles and thunder to uncover the man behind the legend, who was Moses really? Leader, lawgiver, prophet, or something even deeper? Today, you'll see the invisible threads of destiny at work, secrets that shape not just one nation, but the very meaning of freedom and obedience. If you think you know Moses, think again. Prepare to journey beyond the parted waters and the stone tablets, into the mind and soul of a man who dared to draw near to the fire. What you are about to discover will cast new light on your own spiritual calling. Don't blink. This is the moment where history and the divine collide. A newborn's cry pierces the midnight hush of ancient Egypt, a cry that, if heard, will bring death. The mighty Nile, lifeblood of a civilization, slips silently through moonlit reeds. Here, a Hebrew mother places her infant son in a woven basket, heart pounding with both terror and hope. Imagine the weight of that moment, the brush of cool papyrus, the scent of river water, and the trembling promise that within this frail cradle fate is unfolding. But why did this scene unfold at all? Why did Moses enter history at precisely this desperate hour? Many recall the plagues and miracles, yet fewer stop to uncover the hidden pressures shaping his story. The biblical account opens not with heroics, but with oppression. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. Exodus 1:8. In a single stroke, safety vanishes. Suspicion replaces favor. The Israelites, once honored guests, become a labor force, crushed by taskmasters, branded foreigners, suffocating under the weight of fear. You might be wondering, why such intense suffering? Why does God remain silent during the decades of heartbreak, allowing an infant's life to hinge on a river's current? The paradox deepens. Suffering births prophecy. The more Egypt tries to crush the Hebrews, the more their numbers mysteriously grow. The Hebrew midwives, defying Pharaoh's most brutal decree, become unlikely heroines, and God rewards them. The stage is set not for an ordinary rescue, but for a deliverer forged in the furnace of despair. Let's step back into those riverbanks. Moses is plucked out of the water by the very daughter of Pharaoh who issued the ruthless order, a twist of irony thick as the Egyptian air. Many believe chance or coincidence governs moments like this, but the profound truth is, a divine thread is weaving together rescue and royal court in the very same act. Moses, drawing his first breath in slavery, is raised under the shadow of palaces, libraries, and the politics of gods and men. What happens next shatters every expectation. Rather than being erased by privilege, Moses becomes a living paradox, Hebrew by birth, Egyptian by nurture. He learns the culture of his oppressors, reads their hieroglyphs, studies their magic, walks their marble corridors. Yet his true identity simmers just beneath the surface. Its attention so sharp you can almost feel it, like a secret struggling to breathe in the suffocating heat of the Nile Valley. This shows us something profound about God's ways, you may think. The path of deliverance does not begin with clarity, but with confusion, secret identities, and navigated dangers. The Bible says, "When Moses was grown, he went out unto his brethren, and looked on their burdens." Exodus 2:11. Imagine Moses, heart torn by seeing both sides, luxury and anguish, in a single glance. His destiny is awakening, not through a grand vision, but by a moral wound. He kills an Egyptian, acting out the agony of a nation with his own hands. At this moment, it seems Moses' chance at greatness evaporates. He flees terrified, hunted, stripped of royal privilege, and exiled to Midian. The sun beats down on the desert, burning away illusions. Here, Moses is not a prince nor a hero. He becomes a shepherd, an anonymous figure tending sheep along the silent mountains, yet this is precisely where God begins to speak. Now a question arises. Why choose exile as the crucible of a deliverer? Why let decades slip by among sheep and sand? The answer is hidden like treasure in the biblical record. Time spent in obscurity is not wasted. It is the dark soil where greatness takes root. Moses learns patience, humility, and the rhythms of the wilderness, the very skills he will need not only to survive, but to lead. And it came to pass that God heard the Israelites groaning and remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. Exodus 2:24. The Bible's language shimmers with anticipation. God moves not in response to schedules, but to cries. Holy ache becomes the trigger for history's greatest rescue. In this tension between promise and pain, destiny stirs like embers under ash. But now picture this: a solitary man carrying the residue of failure is startled by a burning bush, a fire that blazes but does not consume. The Lord calls Moses by name. Shoes are removed, the ground is declared holy, and what was once merely desert becomes the site of revelation. The Lawgiver is summoned, not for his eloquence or power, but precisely because he is emptied, made ready to listen. You might be wondering, did Moses know, as he fled Pharaoh's wrath, that he was stamping out the first footprints of a journey that would split seas? Did he imagine, as he herded sheep beneath a vast, star-pricked sky, that he would soon stand between the mightiest king on earth and the living God? Or was it all mystery, a hidden calling wrapped in decades of silent preparation? This formative era of Moses' life, where history's largest stage meets its most unlikely protagonist, isn't just a backdrop, it's divine choreography. Each sorrow, each silence, every dramatic escape, these are pieces of the puzzle that shape the leader the world would one day follow out of slavery. The opening act isn't about arriving at greatness, but surviving the stripping of one's identity and finding God not in the palace, but in the wilderness. This is the bedrock of the Moses story. From reeds to royalty, exile to encounter, the biblical foundation is not dry history. It's a living mystery that speaks directly to our own seasons of confusion, our wrestlings with identity, our desert places. Ancient texts become a mirror, revealing truths about callings that hide just out of sight, waiting for the moment when the ordinary blazes with holy fire. But this raises an even deeper question. What spiritual secrets are hidden within Moses' journey from failed prince to chosen prophet? What does this tension between suffering and calling reveal about the heart of God and about the spiritual battles we face today? You might think you know the familiar burning bush, the staff, the voice from the flames. But in the next part, we will crack open the spiritual code written into every step of Moses' life. What you're about to discover will not only pull back the veil on Moses the man, but will challenge everything you believe about divine purpose and the way God's voice breaks silence. The next revelation could change your journey forever. Are you prepared to step closer to the fire? How can a wandering exile, burdened by self-doubt and haunted by failure, become the greatest prophet of Israel? How does God take the trembling hands of a shepherd and shape them into instruments that will carry his laws, draw forth water from rocks, and point toward destinies far beyond a human horizon? If Moses' external journey is marked by deserts, palaces, and miracles, his inner journey is even more astonishing, a labyrinth of fear, awe, confrontation, and trust. As we peel away the layers of the biblical Moses, something startling emerges. His story is a map of the soul, a divine blueprint for transforming pain and uncertainty into revelation. Many read the tale of the burning bush and see a miracle, a singular event designed to dazzle. But look closer, beyond the fire itself, and a question flickers in the shadows. Why did God choose to reveal himself precisely at this moment to this reluctant man through a bush that burned but was not consumed? The answer is as electrifying as it is humbling. In this small, fiery beacon, God is whispering a foundational spiritual truth: the divine. Encounter does not incinerate our humanity, but infuses it. Moses' ordinary ground becomes holy not because it is different from ours, but because God steps into it. You might be wondering, how could such a flawed individual become the mouthpiece of the Almighty? Didn't Moses himself protest, "Who am I, that I should go unto Pharaoh?" Exodus 3:11. Here lies the heartbeat of the biblical narrative, the spiritual paradox at the story's center. God consistently, almost stubbornly, chooses the insecure, the broken, the cast-off. It's as if he delights in reversing expectations. The world sees strength as a prerequisite for greatness. God sees humility as a doorway for his glory. This is not merely a comforting idea, but a transformational reality. The drama heightens as God responds to Moses' doubts, not with rebuke, but with presence. "Certainly I will be with thee." Exodus 3:12. Imagine the relief, the overwhelming awe Moses would feel, the God of eternity bending low, offering his very being as the answer to every objection. In spiritual terms, Moses' story becomes an invitation for us. Divine calling is not based on our sufficiency, but on God's sufficiency through us. But the spiritual journey deepens. God reveals his name, "I am that I am," Exodus 3:14, a name both simple and utterly unfathomable. With just 4 Hebrew letters, HWH, God proclaims himself the ground of all being, present, inexhaustible, unchanging. The bush burns with this truth. Moses' mission will not be grounded in political strategy or charismatic ability, but in the living presence and unstoppable existence of God himself. Every miracle, every confrontation from this point forward is built on this foundation. Yet tension throbs beneath the surface. When God calls Moses to speak, Moses clings to his weakness. "O my Lord, I am not eloquent. I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue." Exodus 4:10. Here the narrative thrusts us into spiritual confrontation, not just between Moses and Pharaoh, but between Moses and the limitations he's carried for a lifetime. Many believe that faith requires certainty and heroic resolve, but the profound truth is, faith most often germinates in trembling and surrender. Moses' resistance becomes the canvas for God's reassurance. "Who hath made man's mouth? Have not I, the Lord?" Exodus 4:11. Imagine feeling the weight of this moment, the sense of divine fingers molding your very weaknesses, promising to animate them with power beyond yourself. A mini revelation flickers here. God's intimacy does not shield us from fear, but transforms it into participation. Moses is not given a roadmap. He is given God, not answers, but presence. The spiritual journey is illuminated. Obedience is not stepping forward because we feel able, but because we trust the one who calls us. As Moses returns to Egypt, armed with nothing but a staff and a promise, the spiritual stakes intensify. The confrontation with Pharaoh is not just political theater, it is cosmic warfare. The 10 plagues, with their escalating severity, are a direct assault on Egypt's gods, river, sun, life and death. The message rings out for all time. No power, political, spiritual or natural, can stand against the living God. And yet, It is through Moses's stuttering faith that God chooses to display this dominion. This shows us something profound about spiritual leadership. The essence of Moses's authority is revealed not in thunder and spectacle, but in his willingness to be the vessel. The staff in his hand becomes the metaphor, a simple shepherd's tool transformed by obedience into an extension of the miraculous. What does God ask of those he calls? Not perfection, just the courage to offer what is in our hand and to trust him with the impossible. You might be wondering, why the law? After the dazzling escape from Egypt through blood on doorposts, parted seas, and pillars of fire, why does God draw Moses up Mount Sinai into thunder and darkness to give commandments carved in stone? The answer shimmers beneath the surface. Liberation is only the beginning. True freedom must be guided, formed, and sustained. The law is not a prison, but a pathway, a vision of life shaped around divine values. Picture the moment. Lightning splits the black Sinai sky. Smoke billows around trembling Israelites, and Moses ascends alone into the storm. No scene in all of Scripture so powerfully dramatizes the collision of holiness and humanity. And the Lord said unto Moses, Come up to me into the mount, and be there, and I will give thee tables of stone. Exodus 24:12. Moses becomes the living bridge, the mediator between transcendence and earthiness. Silence and speech, God and the people. In this, Moses points toward the ultimate spiritual mediator, a pattern echoed through every age. And yet the narrative does not spare us from paradox. As Moses communes with God, the people below melt their golden treasures into an idol. The law arrives even as the covenant is almost shattered. Here, in the space between revelation and rebellion, we confront humanity's deepest struggles, the thirst for tangible gods, the impatience for invisible promises, the easy slide from awe to disobedience. Was the law just a barrier, or something more? Was Moses' intercession, standing between judgment and mercy, a glimpse of an even greater mediation to come? Let this sink in. Moses dares to argue with God, to plead for grace, even to offer himself in exchange for his people. Yet now, if thou wilt forgive their sin, and if not, blot me, I pray thee, out of thy book. Exodus 32:32. No meek submission here, just sacrificial love, bold wrestling, and the ache of a leader's heart. The spiritual insight is staggering. Intimacy with God isn't sanitized, it is forged in honest struggle. Moses becomes, quite literally, a friend of God, not because of his success, but because of his willingness to stand in the gap. This exposes something breathtaking about God himself. He invites participation, even argument. The Lord reveals his glory to Moses with the words, the Lord God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering and abundant in goodness and truth. Exodus 34:6. Imagine the radiance flooding Moses' senses, his face shining with reflected presence. Every encounter leaves its mark. Every prayer transforms both God's servant and God's people. Here's a mini conclusion. Moses' spiritual path is not a line from weakness to strength, but a spiral ever deeper into relationship, repentance, and radical dependence. His every failure, every doubt, becomes the opening for a new revelation of grace. The more Moses surrenders, the more God reveals. But this raises an even deeper mystery. Is the journey of Moses not simply a tale of one man, but a template for every soul seeking God? Could it be that the spiritual battles we face, the burning bushes we ignore, the deserts we endure, the mountains we ascend in trembling, are invitations to the same intimacy, the same transformation? Does God still speak from fire? Does he still invite frail people to become conduits for miracles? If only they will turn aside and look. And what about that promised land, the domain that Moses sees from afar but never enters in this life? Is it a cruel consequence, or the whisper of an even larger purpose that stretches beyond any personal achievement? What you're about to discover in the next stage will unveil how these ancient spiritual patterns crackle with relevance for us today. Prepare for unexpected connections, where Moses' wilderness meets our daily struggles, and where the lawgiver's journey becomes a living roadmap for your own encounters with the divine. The next revelations may feel at once uncomfortably close and electrifyingly new. Are you willing to see with fresh eyes how the story of Moses is not finished but still unfolding in your world, in your heart, even now? Centuries have passed since Moses first stepped out of the shadows and onto the world's grandest stage, yet his footsteps thunder through the corridors of today. The shifting sands of Egypt may have swallowed the dust of his exile. The tablets of stone may have worn with time, but the echoes of his choices, stumbles, and revelations linger at the heart of modern life. You might assume Moses is locked in ancient memory, but every day, from boardrooms to battlefields, from classrooms to quiet corners of the soul, the drama of Moses is being replayed. How can the journey of a shepherd prophet illuminate the path for us, here and now? Let's wake up to the real world. Imagine a pressured mother, overwhelmed by circumstances, forced to make an impossible decision for her child's safety. Picture the leader who must speak truth to power despite trembling hands, risking everything for integrity. Notice the weary, questioning soul, wrestling with failure and smallness, seeking identity in the vast churn of a culture that often forgets its own story. Can you sense it? The Moses story isn't relic, it's blueprint. Consider, we live in a world obsessed with confidence, yet haunted by insecurity. Leadership books flood the market, telling us to own the room or project authority. But Moses defies these formulas. The lessons of his life churn against the tides of modern self-sufficiency. He is chosen not because he believes in himself, but because he is willing to be mastered by a mission greater than himself. Many believe the strongest are called. The profound truth is that those who answer are simply willing to be interrupted. Pause here. A CEO stands under blinding lights. A nation watches his every word. Yet behind the bravado, there's often a Moses moment. The voice in the night whispering, "Who am I to do this?" The single parent, the teacher, the organizer marching for justice, all stand at some point barefoot somewhere between despair and duty. Imagine the pressure in those shoes, hope and fear swinging in the balance. Yet what if the burning bush moment is not a once-in-a-lifetime supernatural encounter, but a daily call to notice sacred possibilities in our most ordinary places? God still speaks in the detours, when career plans unravel, when relationships break, when success loses its luster. That still unsettling invitation to turn aside and see waits in the margins of emails, hospital rooms, protests, and hungry nights. The miracle is not that fires burn, but that ordinary people dare to look, hear, and respond. Do you see yourself yet? Are you, like Moses, haunted by failures or the fear of not measuring up? Moses' journey smashes the myth that perfect people shape history. In the rush traffic of our days, in the anxiety of never enough, the Moses pattern is revolutionary. God doesn't ask if you're able, he asks if you're available. The turning point is not in expertise, but in surrender. Here is a real-world revelation. We all possess staffs, simple overlooked gifts or weaknesses that, if offered in obedience, become channels for transformation. The staff might be a word of encouragement, a willingness to stand up for someone overlooked, an act of generosity, or a skill honed in obscurity. Recall the nurse who, exhausted and unseen, takes an extra moment to comfort a patient. the youth worker who steps into violent neighborhoods with nothing but a listening ear and stubborn hope, the student who organizes a protest, risking reputation because justice burns in their bones. These are modern-day carriers of the staff, opening paths, confronting pharaohs of their time, injustice, despair, indifference. Let's not miss the continuing miracle. The law entrusted to Moses still ripples outward, underpinning the very notion of human rights and responsibility. The 10 words, carved in ancient stone, are mirrored in courtrooms, social contracts, and even moments when one person chooses integrity over expedience. Yet for many, law feels cold, a burden. The paradox is electric. The spirit echoed in Moses lights corridors of compassion when law is woven, not just into systems but into hearts. Pause and feel the drama. When civil rights legends like Martin Luther King Jr. evoked Moses leading his people toward the Promised Land, it wasn't empty rhetoric. King's staff was nonviolent resistance. His burning bush was a deep, personal encounter with divine justice, and his wilderness was the relentless opposition and setbacks he faced. When Holocaust survivors rebuilt their lives, clinging to old commandments in a new world, was it not the same law of dignity traced in trembling hands? When refugees today flee brutality, crossing waters with children in arms, do you sense a shadow of the Nile, the echo of hope threading their journey? Mini conclusion. The legacy of Moses is not a closed book. It's the pulse of every liberation movement, every search for identity, every bold step taken in the grip of fear. It is ordinary people, facing impossible odds, yet forging forward because some flicker of hope, planted by God, will not die. Yet there's a deeper layer. The voice from the bush did not end as a message to Moses alone, but as a challenge to every hearer. Take off your shoes. What if each day was lived as holy ground? What if work, conflict, grief, and routine became spaces for God's encounter? The world aches for leaders who, like Moses, will risk authenticity over image, justice over comfort, obedience over anxiety. Leadership by control fractures. Leadership by surrendered presence transforms. You might be wondering, what about failure? Isn't it devastating that Moses, after years of faithfulness, never enters the land he saw from afar? In our world, results are everything, yet God measures success by faithfulness, not finish lines. The disappointment of Moses is not a tragedy, it's testimony. Our calling is rarely about reaching some achievement, but about deepening in trust, persisting in the journey, and preparing the way for those who follow. Success in the divine economy is walking with God through every desert. This brings us to a hard, liberating truth. Even the greatest must accept limitation. Many leaders burn out trying to do it all, carry it all, fix it all. But Moses models a countercultural wisdom. He delegates, he admits pain, he leans constantly on God's guiding presence. When the burden feels crushing, Moses does not hide it. I am not able to bear all this people alone because it is too heavy for me. Numbers 11:14. It's in those honest moments that grace floods in and community grows. In our communities, our families, teams, neighborhoods, the Moses story challenges us to reshape how we carry one another, how we respond to need, and how we seek wisdom beyond our own limits. In every sphere where exiles become leaders, where outcasts rewrite history, where silence gives way to justice, Moses is present. But this raises an irresistible question. What contemporary wilderness are you being called to walk through, not in your own strength, but as a vessel for something greater? Where is your burning bush flickering unnoticed in the corners of your existence? What if the greatest act of leadership in your life is not the one that wins applause, but the one that stands quietly for what is right precisely when it is hardest? What you're about to discover in the next chapter is nothing short of astonishing. How Moses' prophetic thread stretches into the horizon of our tomorrow, reshaping dreams, justice, destiny, and even the very battles yet to come. If you've ever wondered whether your struggles could be the seeds of a larger story, whether your ordinary life might be swept into divine history, get ready. The revelations ahead are about to deepen, and you won't want to miss what happens when prophecy collides with possibility. Will you dare to step into the future that God is still writing? Stay with me, because the next part may forever change how you see your own journey. Imagine standing at the edge of the ancient wilderness, dusk falling as wind stirs golden dust across the stones. In the fading light, Moses gazes upon a land brimming with promise, a homeland he will never enter. The greatest liberator in history ends his journey peering at a future just out of reach. It is here, in this charged silence, that the prophetic river flowing from Moses' life gains its greatest momentum. If you listen closely, you can hear a question echoing through the ages. Does the story of Moses truly end at this mountain ridge, or does his prophetic shadow stretch into tomorrows not yet dreamed? The paradox sharpens. Many believe prophecy is merely prediction, glimpses of catastrophe or glory whispered by mystics. But the profound truth is, biblical prophecy is as much about formation as it is about foretelling. It is the divine seed planted in the soil of the present, blossoming long after the one who first sowed it has gone. Moses' last moments are shrouded with mystery and expectation, blessings and warnings swirling together as he speaks to the emerging nation. I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing, therefore choose life. Deuteronomy 13:19. In these words, the future is not a fixed script, but a living invitation. But you might be wondering, how does a figure who lived more than 3,000 years ago set the trajectory for things yet to come? Moses' prophecy is vast, spanning much more than the immediate fortunes of Israel. In the haunting valleys and the sharp peaks of his farewell speech, there reside echoes of conflicts, choices, and hopes that pulse with meaning even now. Consider this: Moses prophesied not in isolation, but as a pattern, a signpost. His very life becomes blueprint, a living roadmap by which every generation would weigh its own destiny. The Lord, your God, will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, he declares. You shall listen to him. Deuteronomy 18:15. These words, simple and enigmatic, shimmer down the centuries, sparking debate and hope in equal measure. Who is this prophet? Like Moses, what power does such a shadow hold over the future? Let's pause and feel the tension. Through war and peace, exile and return, the children of Israel would measure every leader, every teacher, against the Moses standard, yearning for a deliverer who would again open seas and bring forth revelation. The prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, each stand as smaller lights drawn from Moses' flame, painting visions of renewal, justice, and a world restored. Every promise of a new covenant, every anticipation of hearts softened, is illuminated by the lawgiver's torch. Fast forward centuries. In the New Testament, the life of Jesus is painted deliberately in Moses' hues. Born under threat of death, fleeing harm, teaching on mountains, feeding multitudes, even shining with radiant glory as Moses did on Sinai. The crowd whispers, "Is this the prophet?" The Gospels ripple with Mosaic imagery, casting Jesus as both fulfillment and surprise. Here the prophecy morphs, the law written on stone now breathed into hearts, the exile turned to embrace, death transfigured into resurrection. Moses, peering from the promised land's threshold, becomes the harbinger of ultimate liberation, not just from empire, but from sin, fear, and despair itself. But the prophetic current does not stall in ancient texts or New Testament echoes. Its power surges onward, shaping not just individuals, but the very DNA of nations, movements, and the unfolding story of humanity. Moses' legacy threads through global longings for freedom, justice, and covenant. The lawgivers demand that communities pursue justice without partiality. Deuteronomy 16:19. Care for the stranger and love God fiercely still fuels the conscience of societies wrestling with injustice and hope. What about our future? You might be asking, does the Moses prophecy still speak? The answer is as sobering as it is electric. Every time a society stands at a crossroads between freedom and fear, compassion and exploitation, faithfulness and forgetting, the voice of Moses resounds, "I have set before you life and death. Choose life." The prophetic horizon is never static. Think of civil rights movements wrestling over the promised land, of equality, or global conversations about stewardship, peace and purpose. The spirit of Moses lives whenever we dare to hope and to struggle for a better world, for a new future that only God can fully reveal. But prophecy is more than public destiny. It is also deeply personal. Are you standing right now on a mountain's edge in your own story? Perhaps you see dreams you may never enter, promises that feel just beyond your grasp. Moses' life whispers that God's faithfulness stretches further than our individual timelines, that the seeds sown in obedience may blossom in generations we'll never meet. His willingness to trust, to bless others' journey onward becomes a prophetic template for selfless hope. A mini-conclusion emerges here. The prophetic reality ushered in by Moses is not locked in the past, nor limited to a chosen few. It is a living thread, weaving every act of courage, every tempered word, every bold vision of justice into a fabric that stretches to the end of time. God invites us not just to witness prophecy, but to step into its unfolding, to be living echoes of the same spirit that called Moses out of exile and shaped the future through fractured hands. And yet, the tension rises. The world still groans under pharaohs, systems and powers who mock freedom, oppress the powerless, and trade stones for bread. Catastrophe and promise walk hand in hand through our headlines. Where are the Moses leaders willing to confront them? Where are the prophets who will thunder for justice, intercede for mercy, and shepherd communities across invisible and impossible boundaries? The question vibrates. Are we willing to see past our own lives, to invest in futures we may never witness, to speak the words, "Choose life," in a culture that prefers shortcuts and shadows? You may sense the weight of destiny as you watch these ancient patterns unfold. But don't shrink back. The prophecy of Moses is not finished. In fact, its crescendo may yet be ahead, the day when justice rolls down like waters, when divisions cease, when every exile finds home at last. In both Jewish and Christian hope, the ultimate prophet like Moses is yet to lead a final cosmic exodus, out of bondage of every kind, into a new creation, shimmering with promise. What you're about to discover next will recast Moses' legacy once more, not as an artifact or echo, but as a living invitation to deeper relationship with God, with yourself, and with the very world aching for redemption. Are you prepared to become, in your ordinary days, a bearer of the same flame that once ignited a bush, split a sea, and awoke a generation? The next revelation is about to unlock spiritual connections that will breathe ancient hope into vibrant reality. If you're willing to step through the threshold and into the fire that still burns, will you follow the prophetic thread all the way home? Don't look away now. The journey's most intimate secrets are about to be revealed. What if the greatest treasure in the Moses story isn't just the passage through parted waters or the thunderous revelation atop a mountain, but a hidden invitation, one that calls us closer, deeper into the heartbeat of relationship with God. What if, beneath the drama and public miracles, Moses' most enduring legacy is his way of walking with the divine, of drawing near until face shines and voice trembles, not from fear, but from awe? Pause and let this sink in. The journey of Moses is not just about leading a nation, it's a persistent drawing near, a radical intimacy that redefines what is possible between the human and the holy. Let's step quietly into the sacred spaces behind the myth. Picture Moses, not as a stone-faced lawgiver or a distant prophet, but as a man whose identity is continually unraveled and rewoven by the presence of God. Scripture whispers, "And the Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend." Exodus 33:11. Imagine the warmth, the quiet fire of that encounter, late at night, the tent filled with palpable presence, silence. Pulsing with mystery and trust, many believe Moses' spiritual connection is unreachable, reserved for the chosen few. But the profound truth is, his pathway is a signpost for all who hunger for depth, for those who long to live not just for God, but with him. How did Moses arrive at this astonishing place? Not by accident. The tent of meeting didn't materialize out of thin air. It grew out of longing, humility, and relentless honesty. Moses is the master of questions. Every step in his journey is marked not by pious certainty, but by wrestling, arguing, opening his doubts in the raw light of God's glory. "Show me now your ways, that I may know you, in order to find favor in your sight," Moses pleads. Exodus 33:13. You might be wondering, is it even safe to pray with such daring honesty? The answer radiates from Moses' life. A spiritual connection deepens, not by pretending to be flawless, but by bringing one's unfiltered self into the holy conversation. It's in the messy tension of confrontations, failures, hopes, and heartbreak that Moses discovers not just God's commands, but God's heart. The secret is vulnerability. Imagine feeling the warmth of that sacred dialogue. Questions, silences, objections, met again and again with patient reassurance and everlasting mercy. Attention pulses through every spiritual life. We long for encounter, but we shrink from the cost. Moses, confronting his own limits, finds revelation not by climbing higher, but by letting God come closer. "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest," God promises, Exodus 33:14. The rest Moses finds isn't mere absence of trouble. It is the peace of walking in step with the divine momentum, trusting guidance even in the thickest cloud. Many seek transcendence as escape, but the Moses connection roots us right where we are. Holy ground, transformed by a whispered word. Step further. In one of the most intimate and daring encounters, Moses pleads, "Please show me your glory." Exodus 33:18. This isn't a request to witness mere spectacle. It's a cry to know God's very character, to stand in the radiant center. God responds, not with lightning, but with a revelation of goodness, proclaiming the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. Exodus 34:6. Imagine the sensory rush, the air shimmering with radiance, the voice vibrating with compassion, the landscape of Moses' soul forever altered. Here, a mini-conclusion gleams. Deep spiritual connection is never generic. It's always personal, always costly. The closer Moses draws, the more marked he becomes. His face shines, not from borrowed glory, but from transformative encounter, carrying the radiance of relationship into the darkest corners of the camp. Spirituality, at its core, is meant to be luminous, not hidden. A fire that spreads, igniting hope and awe in others. But this communion isn't a private privilege. Notice the rhythm. Moses meets God alone, but always returns to the people. His encounters pour outwards, reshaping community, dissolving grumbling, and inviting others to taste and see. The tent of meeting becomes a model, not a museum artifact, but an interior sanctuary each of us is invited to build. You might be asking, is this really available to someone like me? Yes. The Moses pattern is both ancient and startlingly modern. Sacred space, honest dialogue, persistence through wilderness, and willingness to return, marked by love for the sake of others. At every point, the story of Moses shocks us with unexpected contrasts. He is drawn into holy fire, but tasked with leading daily life, overwhelmed by glory, yet grieved by the stubbornness of his own people. Many believe spiritual depth means escape from reality, but the truth is sharper. True encounter always leads to engagement in the messy miracle of communal existence. Moses' shining face is a metaphor for every ordinary person who dares to enter the sacred, emerging to spread light in a shadowed world. But what about when the presence seems to vanish, when the path is clouded by confusion, silence, or even the consequences of our own choices? Moses endures the agony of waiting, 40 days on Sinai, shielded by cloud, seasons of apparent abandonment. It is in these places that trust is most fiercely tested and most powerfully forged. The wilderness, it turns out, is not proof of God's absence, but ground for deeper return. Every spiritual journey cycles through longing, encounter, silence, and new understanding. Lean in and imagine feeling the pulse of these ancient secrets in your own life. What if the invitation of Moses is not only to approach the flaming bush or trembling mountain, but to discover the sanctuary built in the day-to-day, moment by moment, breath by breath, an ongoing orientation toward God? Spiritual connection, Moses teaches, is not an event, but a way of being, an openness that weaves awe into the fabric of routine. Here's a profound implication. The path blazed by Moses is universally open. Every honest prayer, every moment of vulnerability, every yearning for something more than duty is an echo of his cry. The same radiance that illuminated his face is the promise offered to those who dare to seek God, not only in thunder, but in the still, small voice beside the ordinary tasks, joys, and struggles. And yet there's more. The journey to deep spiritual connection doesn't end in private experiences. It points forward, always expanding, always inviting. Wherever there are people willing to pause, turn aside, and wholly listen, wherever someone risks honesty with God and comes away changed, Moses' legacy burns anew. But this opens up a compelling new question. What practical steps can we take to kindle and sustain that living connection in our world of endless distraction, noise, and hurry? Is it truly possible to cultivate a presence-driven life that transforms not just private moments, but every relationship, every act of service, every injustice confronted, and every hope dared? What you are about to discover in the next part may surprise you. A blueprint born of ancient wisdom, ready to be applied in your daily rhythms. Get ready, because the tools that fueled Moses' intimacy with God are not locked in the past. They are within your reach, waiting to reshape the ordinary into the miraculous. Will you dare to build your own tent of meeting? The secret is about to be unveiled. Don't turn away. The journey from fire to flourishing is only beginning. What if the journey of Moses, his secret conversations, his wrestling doubts, his luminous encounters, wasn't meant to remain locked in legend, but to become a living guidebook for your own spiritual growth? Imagine, if you dare, that every trembling step Moses took maps a path through the deserts and crossroads of your own life. The drama may look ancient, but the blueprint is timeless. The way from fear to faith, from confusion to clarity, from routine to radiant encounter. And now the question crackles before you. How can you make the Moses pattern your own? What practical steps will ignite transformation in the ordinary days? How do you do this in the chaos of modern life? Start by weaving moments of stillness into the fabric of your days. Before reaching for your phone each morning, whisper a simple prayer. God, help me notice you today. Practice presence at a red light, in line at a store, or as you listen to a friend's pain. Let curiosity, humble and non-anxious, open space for God to surprise you. Like Moses, be willing to turn off the beaten path, if only for a moment. Many believe prayer must be flowery or formal, but the profound truth is relationship deepens through authenticity, not performance. Practice breath prayers, simple repeated phrases you can carry throughout the day, like, "Here I am, Lord," or "Guide my steps." Echo Moses' own vulnerability and you'll discover God meets us most powerfully in unvarnished honesty. Ask yourself, what small stones could you lay down to mark your path? Even Jesus, the prophet like Moses, went to a solitary place to pray. Mark 1:35. Spiritual maturity is built one quiet, intentional step at a time. You might be wondering, could your ordinary actions really matter? The Moses story insists they do. Call someone who is lonely, speak encouragement, forgive an old wound, advocate for someone unseen. Each act is a ripple seeded by encounter. You will discover, as Moses did, that burdens lessen and miracles multiply in the midst of honest togetherness. In moments of weariness or doubt, let others lift your arms, as Aaron and Hur did on the hill, Exodus 17:12, until the battle shifts. The longing for deep spiritual growth is not a solitary echo, but a chorus waiting to be joined. A mini-conclusion pulses here. Spiritual transformation is not a grand event, but a series of ordinary, faithful responses to an extraordinary God. One pause, one question, one rhythm, one act of compassion, one shared journey at a time. The Moses way is within everyone's reach. Perhaps even now you sense your own heart stirring, longing for the fire that does not consume, for practical steps that lead from yearning to transformation. Do not dismiss that ache. The Moses story beckons. Every season has its invitation. Every wilderness can bloom. But this raises another riveting question. How do these personal practices spill out to shape not just our individual lives, but also the communities and cultures we inhabit? How does the fire spread? What happens when ordinary seekers, forged in small daily faithfulness, become catalysts of renewal for families, congregations, even entire societies? What you are about to witness in the next part will reveal how shared faith, when ignited by these ancient rhythms, becomes a force of belonging, resilience, and hope. Are you ready to see the ripple effects of what began long ago in the secret heart of one shepherd and his God? The journey is entering its most communal, contagious, and transformative phase. Do not step away now, because what happens next may redefine what you believe is possible. Imagine the hush that fell over the desert camp at dusk, 1,000,000 souls, dust swirling in golden light, the lowing of herds, laughter echoing near flickering fires. In the center stands a tent, radiant with otherworldly presence. The story of Moses was never meant to be the journey of a lone hero. It is the birth of community, ragged, messy, luminous, a people forged in the crucible of faith and wandering. And even now, as you catch a glimpse of those ancient campsites, can you feel the resonance? The march of Moses' story has always been about something larger, belonging. Many believe spirituality is a private climb toward enlightenment, a solitary ascent to mountaintop revelations. Yet the profound truth throbs throughout the Moses narrative. Faith is meant to be lived in the echo of others' voices, shaped by shared struggle, collective memory, and communal hope. Every miracle that Moses performs, every law delivered on Sinai's blazing heights, pulses not in isolation, but as a gift to the people he leads. People who murmur, stumble, dance, repent, and dream together. Consider the rhythms God establishes through Moses. The Sabbath, a day when the whole community breathes together, and Passover, a meal not for prophets but for families, encircling tables scented with roasted lamb and unleavened bread. These are practices meant to stitch individuals together, turning strangers into kin, forging memory and mission into the very DNA of a people. Pause and imagine the first Passover night, parents whispering to children, old hopes trembling in the candlelight, the presence of God hovering not just over the mighty, but over every common home. You might be wondering, what does this ancient drama have to do with us, scattered in our digital, hyper-individual lives? Picture a neighborhood gathering food for the hungry, or voices joining across backgrounds in protest or prayer, or a circle of friends carrying the grief of one another when sorrow pierces. Whenever individuals gather, bearing each other's burdens, enacting hope in real time, there too you find the spirit of Sinai alive and contagious. Yet tension simmers just under the surface. Moses knows better than anyone how frail, fractious, and frustrating faith communities can be. How many times does the crowd threaten mutiny, nostalgia for slavery, panic for water or food? Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, they cry, Exodus 16:3. Many lose heart, yet Moses never gives up. Why? Because he has glimpsed that God's commitment to community is fierce, unbreakable, a covenant sealed not by perfect performance, but by relentless mercy. The Lord, gracious and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. Exodus 34:6. God himself shapes a people not by eliminating weakness, but by infusing presence in their midst. Could it be that our own imperfect gatherings, churches, families, faith groups, are not failures, but training grounds for long-suffering love, shared celebration, and holy persistence? The campfires of Israel flickered with disagreement, boredom, betrayal, and repentance, just as our own friendships and faith communities do. Yet it is here, right in the mess, that God's presence dwells most intimately. Spiritual greatness is less about soaring above others and more about circling down to bear them up. Notice what happens when Moses, wearied and burdened beyond description, finally confesses, "I am not able to bear all this people alone. The burden is too heavy for me." Numbers 11:14. God's answer is not solitary heroics, but shared leadership. 70 elders, a brother and a sister, a successor in Joshua, a constellation of gifts and personalities. Seekers today are invited to learn. Isolation is not the badge of spirituality, but often its greatest enemy. Every Moses needs an Aaron. Every vision needs a circle of hands and hearts. Here's a mini conclusion. In the Chronicle of Moses, community is both the context and the catalyst of spiritual vibrancy. The glory is never just for one. The law is written not for private devotion, but for public flourishing. Each person, flawed and miraculous, becomes a living stone in a spiritual house. But let's not forget the traditions that Moses launched, traditions that still shape millions: the annual assembly at Sinai's foot, communal reading of the law, seasons of mourning and rejoicing held in common. Throughout Jewish and Christian history, the Moses pattern is repeated whenever sacred stories are retold, and broken bread is shared, and prayers turn strangers into siblings. But the paradox sharpens. The same fire that knits us together can threaten to consume us, if not for the gift of forgiveness. Moses intercedes for his people after they fall, imploring, wrestling, even offering himself as a substitute. Exodus 32:32. Real community is possible only where grace triumphs over grievances, where memory is shaped by both struggle and renewal. Trace the thread into our world, and you see Moses' legacy wherever communities endure, forgive, and keep moving forward together, warts and all. Think of the civil rights marches, where hymns and solidarity carried hope through tear gas and hatred. Remember congregations quietly housing refugees, small circles maintaining ancient rituals while the world forgets. Each embodies the Mosaic vision, people marked by God's presence, summoned to journey. Together, sustained by a hope that outlasts every disappointment. Let this truth ignite you. A table open to all, bread passed and prayers shared, is a tent of meeting as surely as anything in Sinai's shadow. The world does not need more isolated spirituality, but contagious communal faith that burns away fear and forges belonging. And now, you might be wondering, if community is the forge for faith, what does it look like when individual stories and shared journeys collide? How do the ripples of one life touch the horizon of generations? What happens when the setbacks, miracles, and confessions of real people are woven into a narrative greater than their own? What you will discover in the next part is not just history, but living story. A testimony of how one life surrendered to God and rooted in community can spark transformation that spreads far beyond imagination. Get ready, for the final act may unveil the greatest surprise of all, the power of personal reflection and transformative testimony. Stay with me, because the secret ending of Moses is about to unfold, and it just might change your story forever. As the final embers of Moses' journey flicker beneath the star-drenched skies of Moab, a hush falls over the story, a holy silence, shimmering with the weight of everything that has come before. Picture Moses on the mountain, his eyes sweeping across the horizon, seeing at last the land of promise. It is a sight filled with longing and bittersweet triumph, yet in that solitary moment, something profound is unveiled. The story of Moses becomes a mirror, reflecting the possibility of transformation for every life that dares to journey with God. Have you ever paused and asked yourself, what might it mean if the real legacy of Moses is not just the liberation of a nation, but the quiet, sacred revolution that can take root in your ordinary days? Many believe that epic change is reserved for saints or prophets, but the truly astonishing revelation is that God delights in weaving the extraordinary out of the humble fabric of human lives just like yours. Walk for a moment into the wilderness of your own experience. Have you ever felt lost, uncertain of identity, wrestling with the shadows of your past? Imagine the way Moses must have felt. Once a prince, then an exile, now a shepherd whose best days seemed behind him. His story insists that your place of exile or obscurity can become the chamber where destiny is forged. The burning bush appears not in a palace, but in the loneliness of the desert. Perhaps your most hidden wounds, your quietest prayers, are precisely where sacred fire is kindled today. Let's collect a few transformative stories, modern echoes of the Moses journey. Consider Maria, a single mother haunted by abandonment, who found a community church where someone listened and dared to believe that her story mattered. Inspired by Moses, she wrote letters of encouragement to other women in struggle, transforming wounds into wells of living hope. Like Moses, Maria's greatest ministry arose not from perfect circumstances, but from honest surrender. Or think of Daniel, a young man wrestling with depression, believing he was defined by failure. After reading the story of Moses arguing with God, naming his doubts yet walking forward anyway, Daniel began journaling his own questions, using the raw material of anxiety as a pathway into prayer. Over time, his honesty kindled spiritual resilience, healing not only himself, but those who read his words and felt less alone. Pause here and let your own story breathe. You might be wondering, could my weaknesses, my questions, and even my failures be the soil for transformation? Consider that Moses never shed his stutter, never escaped the ache of disappointment, but his honesty became the vessel for a deeper glory. In God's hands, even brokenness is sculpted into blessing. Scripture promises, "My power is made perfect in weakness," 2 Corinthians 12:9. A truth lived and breathed through Moses from Egypt's courts to Sinai's heights. Hear the heartbeat of every transformative life, openness. Moses models again and again the courage to turn aside, to listen, to risk obedience, sometimes trembling, never fully certain, yet always moving forward. This rhythm is available to you. Every time you turn from distraction to prayer, step into service rather than apathy, return to community after hurt, you are reenacting the journey Moses pioneered. But let's draw the lens even closer. What about the moments when the promised land seems out of reach, when your hopes appear deferred? Moses' story doesn't resolve in the way we expect. He doesn't set foot in the land for which he labored. Yet, as the final chapter unfolds, an even deeper transformation is revealed. God himself buries Moses, and the memory of his life is woven not just into Scripture, but into the living faith of every generation. Your story too may echo beyond what you see, touching lives you'll never know, shaping futures far over the horizon of your own journey. A mini-conclusion gleams here. The ultimate measure of spiritual impact is not always visible, not always counted by milestones crossed or trophies gathered, but by the ripples set loose by a single surrendered life. Moses lives on not because of the tablets or the miracles, but because he showed what it means to seek God's face, wrestle with real questions, and keep moving toward the promise, even when the way is hard. You might be feeling a growing sense of awe, or perhaps a yearning. What would it mean to start your own exodus, to move out from shame, old patterns, or the chains of fear? The Moses story whispers that it begins right now, with the decision to turn aside, to listen, and to walk forward one step at a time. Share your story no matter how inauspicious it feels. Risk vulnerable prayers. Gather with others. Name your Egypt, and invite God to lead you onward. In every faltering journey toward freedom, the spirit of Moses walks with you. Here, the paradox soars. The life most surrendered is the life most fruitful, often in ways we may never grasp in this life. Moses glimpsed a land he would not enter, but his faith unfurled a story of liberation that reverberates across millennia, crossing borders of race, nation, and time. Your own small acts of courage, forgiveness, honesty, love might set forth ripples whose destination only God can see. But now, the final irresistible question burns before us. Where will your journey lead? What secret seeds of captivity and calling lie hidden in your own life? Could it be that the greatest chapters have not yet been written? That the same God who called Moses from obscurity to friendship now whispers your name, inviting you into an unfolding adventure? What you're about to embrace can change everything. A living faith that rises from the ashes of regret, blooms in the cracks of daily life, and finds fullness not in destination, but in devotion. Will you answer the call that echoes from the burning bush, the mountain, the desert, into the very marrow of your days? The next step belongs to you. The ancient story is waiting for your chapter. Are you ready to walk on holy ground? The journey continues, far beyond what eye has seen, ear has heard, or heart has imagined. As we arrive at the end of this remarkable pilgrimage through the life of Moses, the leader who stuttered, the lawgiver who trembled, the prophet who dared to see God, we find ourselves standing on the edge of our own promised lands. We have traced the path from basket to palace, from burning bush to thunderous mountain, from exile's lonely silence to the radiant intimacy of friendship with the divine. Each scene, each miracle, each failure and forgiveness has formed not merely a portrait of a legend, but a living mosaic, a pattern God still uses today to shape hearts, homes, and histories. Now we can clearly see that Moses' journey was never just his own. It is a divine invitation, woven through history, community, and soul, summoning each of us to step into the unfolding story. When we bring all these truths together, the tapestry of Moses' life reveals something stunning and new. Our weaknesses are not barriers, but bridges. Our questions become thresholds, our wilderness seasons, the very ground where holy fire burns. Many live, each day haunted by their limits, but you are invited to discover that, like Moses, sacred destiny often emerges exactly where uncertainty and surrender collide. Pause and let this synthesis rise within you. The real miracle is not only the parting of seas, but the slow transformation of a life, drawn from hiding, called to courage, formed through communion, and poured out in love for others. Imagine finally seeing the entire divine tapestry. The God who called Moses out of the reeds is the same God who calls us today, not to perfection, but to participation, not just to receive the law, but to become living tablets etched with grace, justice, and hope. Emotion gathers as we feel the spiritual crescendo Moses' story ignites, a journey marked by awe and argument, triumph and tears. Consider the power of a single life. A baby rescued by desperate hands sparked the exodus of millions. A man who believed himself unworthy became a friend of God. A community, fractured and afraid, was knit together through endured trial and shared promise. The universal meaning resounds. Your story, too, is sacred. Ground. Whether in the grandeur of public life or the quietness of daily choices, each moment is an invitation to encounter, to carry the light, to leave tracks for those who come after. I want to share a story that brings this home, a modern echo of Moses' pilgrimage. There was a woman who, persevering through decades of smallness and loss, began each morning with an ancient prayer, "Show me today where the bush is burning." She was not a prophet or preacher. She worked in a care facility, tending to the frail and forgotten. Yet in every act of gentle service, every spark of compassion, she would sense the nearness of God. Her faith, humble yet real, transformed the cold halls around her. Patients smiled more, staff grew patient, stories of hope multiplied. Like Moses, she carried light into dark places, and by doing so, invited others into sacred encounter. Imagine how your life would change if you, too, dared to turn aside, if you noticed burning bushes in unexpected places, embraced honest dialogue with God, lived by sacred rhythms, and believed your ordinary steps could ripple through eternity. When you begin to approach each day as holy ground, you'll witness how small acts ignite inexhaustible hope. When you offer your weaknesses, you'll find God's strength. When you gather in wounded, persevering community, you'll discover the promised land is less a destination, more a way of being together on sacred journey. This is God's moment for you. The call now reverberates not just in ancient wilderness, but in today's hearts and homes. The invitation is urgent and alive. Step into the adventure, risk vulnerability, cultivate rhythms, embrace others, and watch your story become a living echo of Moses' own. The world does not need more spectators. It longs for willing hearts who will say, "Here I am, send me." So how will you respond? Will you let the legacy of Moses end as mere inspiration, or will you move from learning to living, from remembering to reshaping? Share your story in the comments below. Where have you encountered your own burning bush? When have you felt the pull of calling, the ache of desert, the nearness of holy? Let this space become a campfire, a gathering where truth and hope ignite new stories. Because every voice matters, and your experience may be the liberation someone else needs to hear. Invite a friend or loved one to join this journey. Share this video with your community, family, or faith group. Discuss the lessons, challenge one another to cultivate sacred rhythms, and together build the kind of transparent, persevering fellowship that Moses so fiercely modeled. And as you do, hold anticipation close, because our next video will explore the spiritual journeys of those who followed Moses, Joshua, Miriam, and a new generation of hope-bearers. There is so much more light to uncover in the mysterious pattern of divine call and human response. Let these words echo the heart of this story and the voice you are invited to carry forward. There has never arisen a prophet since in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. Deuteronomy 34:10. Face to face. This is the invitation that ignites every life, an intimacy, a calling, a legacy stronger than fear, more enduring than stone. Many live on the edges of their own stories, but you are called to step into the center of God's unfolding promise. May you go forth, face to face, heart to heart, courage awakened, story renewed. The fire that lit Moses still burns, waiting for those who will turn aside, listen, and answer. Will you be that one? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. Exodus 4:12. The story continues with you.